Greetings again, fellow scale modelers. I want to apologize for the quality of some of the photographs that have appeared in my thumbnail and in my channel art. YouTube has a very strong position on copyright, and I do not want to use anybody else's video or anybody else's music for fear of a copyright infringement. I would love to start these videos with Canberras that are flying, and there are some in the world left, but I don't think we have any flying ones left in Southern Africa. I would love to start these videos with Canberras that are flying, and there are some in the world left, but I don't think we have any flying ones left in Southern Africa, and certainly not in South Africa anymore. There are two airframes left in South Africa. One of them is on a plinth at the Waterkloof Air Force Base, and I am showing you a photograph now of the coordinates that you can go to in Google Earth, and by using Street View you can actually see that aircraft on an elevated plinth. That is in fact the same aeroplane that I took photographs about 30 years ago, and which were done originally in ordinary film, and I've had to scan them to get them into the digital world. There is a second airframe which is very accessible at one of our museums, but it is under a shade structure and you cannot get good photographs of it except in minor details without getting some of the other South African aircraft into the picture. So whilst I have good photographs that I took 30 odd years ago, and I can actually touch one and actually investigate any minor details I wish. The tail of the Canberra, or the fin of the Canberra, has an unusual shape. The reason it is of an unusual shape is because the first prototype had a curved fin, and it was cut down because of over control and problems aerodynamically, and the Canberra fin has remained in a flattened top shape ever since. Other aircraft types also have very distinctive fins. I'm thinking of de Havilland, which had their tiger moth type fin. The North American Mustang had a very, very distinctive tail, and the Boeing B-17 also had a distinctive tail shape. I would like to tell you a little story about taking my family, my son and my youngest daughter, up to Duxford one day. I had taken the children some 15 years ago on a trip to the United Kingdom, and I had said that we were going to go and visit Stonehenge in Wiltshire, which is west of London, and we were definitely heading north. My daughter was asleep. My son was reading a book about flying turbo-charged engines, because I owned a turbocharged twin Piper Seneca in those days. And so we turned off left just before we get to Cambridge, and we had the Duxford airfield on the left, and they still haven't understood what we were coming to. And we turned right into the officers' mess area and the other buildings, beautiful old red brick buildings and beautiful oak trees, etc. And my son said, "There's an awful lot of cars here." And I said, "Well, Stonehenge is a very popular visitors attraction." And still he didn't know any the wiser. And even though we went through the ticket booths, we had to go, so I had got prepaid tickets, and there were adverts on the ticket booths for the Duxford Air Show, which was a Warbirds air show that was taking place that very day. We then crossed over the road that we had approached the airfield and parking area, and using a footbridge, and as we got to the top of the footbridge, my son saw the 12 Spitfires in a line in the Duxford airfield, and he said, "Dad, this is not Stonehenge, is it?" And I said, "Of course not. I wouldn't bring you to the UK to go and look at a pile of rocks." So that is why I am using the photograph I do have of the fin of a Canberra as my thumbnail, because it is of such a distinctive shape. In fact, my son pointed out whilst we were walking amongst the aircraft on the Duxford airfield that there was a Boeing B-17 parked some distance away, and all he could see was the top of the fin, and by the shape of the top of the fin and presumably the brown army colour, that was in fact a Boeing B-17, and of course he was correct. So that is why I have used the unusual fin shape of the Canberra. I have also decided in my fiberglass research of the last month or two that I'm going to buy a set of dedicated tools for working with fiberglass, because although I have these tools in my existing workshop, I do not want to use them. I wanted a dedicated set of tools for working with fiberglass. I've also read up a lot about safety and the safety equipment that one is supposed to use, and I have identified a source for a respirator, which the books tell me are mandatory. I also have plenty of pairs of safety glasses in my workshop, and obviously protective clothing, which I have plenty of. I also want to talk about how I plan to make the plugs from which I intend to make the female molds to make the final male mold, or the male fuselage sections. There would be approximately 10 female molds if the fuselage is broken into 3 sections. That gives 6 molds, and there will be 2 molds each for each of the engines because they appear to be handed left and right. I am not planning to model the tip tanks at this stage because they are also left and right hand and could involve a further 4 molds. And that brings me to the problem of storage, which my son raised with me. How am I going to store the plugs and the molds once I have used them? And I have decided that I have plenty of room in the roof space of my workshop and of my home to store these items. I also want to talk about the span-wise loading that I intend to adopt for analysis purposes. I was watching the wide-body transports aircraft landing at London Heathrow early in the morning with obviously a certain degree of flap, and as they increased the angle of attack you could see the condensation on top of the wings. This condensation did not extend to the circular wide body of these aircraft, and so what I am proposing is that I will use, and you will see a picture of this shown up now, where I'm planning to use a constant loading between the jet engine and the fuselage and a parabolic loading from the engine out to the wingtip. I also want to consider chord-wise loading. The Canberra bomber, at the scale I intend to build it, has a chord of about 940 millimeters. So I'm showing a second diagram of what I intend to do as far as the chord-wise distribution of the loading. And the Canberra has a 40% max thickness at 40% of the chord, and I have drawn a line from the trailing edge through that point up to 20% chord, and then I will go constant load forward of there. I'm hoping that this will approximate the rather curved shape that has been determined for pressures above and below on the aerofoil section, and this is an approximation, but I think it's a justifiable and reasonable assumption. The aircraft also has to be handled and picked up by the tips, wing tips, so I will ensure that I have sufficient structure available to carry, say, 2G, twice the load of the aeroplane, as though it were picked up on 2 points, because we often would pick up model aircraft by the wingtips. It is now time to bring this episode into land, and I would look forward to hearing from you in due course. I have concluded this with, again, my email address so that you could, in fact, send me an email. Thank you.